They've been home to thousands of inmates over the decades, and in that time our county's prisons have been home to some pretty highly publicized incidents. From infamous inmates wreaking havoc to prisoners uniting to rebel against the regime, HMP Hull, Humber and Full Sutton have seen their fair share of episodes, and none of them have been able to escape controversy over the years. We decided to delve into the archives and take a look back at some of the most notorious tales to emerge from East Yorkshire's 3 jails, and to see how they created waves and impacted our prison service. Here are the 6 most infamous cases which you may remember, or perhaps you would rather forget. The devastating Hull prison riot of 1976. Prisoners donned balaclavas and climbed up onto the prison roof. Image, Hull Daily Mail. It started off as a rather lackluster demonstration by inmates complaining about life inside the prison. However, it soon escalated into a sinister rooftop demonstration which caused turmoil in the prison service, the courts, and even Westminster. On the evening of August 31, 1976, reports of unrest emerged when a group of prisoners assembled demanding to see a fellow inmate who was on the segregation unit. The posse claimed he had been assaulted, and with more prisoners starting to band together on A wing, the staff alarm bell was ultimately pressed. Rather than resort to aggressive tactics, the group staged a passive sit-in and blocked a prison officer from locking a door. Inmates trashed 2/3 of the prison. Image, HDM. Eventually all the prisoners in B wing barricaded themselves in with A wing prisoners and began smashing furniture and fittings to express their displeasure at conditions inside the prison. Throughout the night, prisoners, who were now deemed hostile, managed to get onto the roofs of various wings and start hurling missiles at police officers and prison staff below. Prison officers from Leeds, Wakefield and Everthorpe were called in as pandemonium ensued, and by September 1, prisoners had control of the 2/3 of the entire prison. Over the next few days, balaclava-clad prisoners destroyed the wings and created placards which read, "Stop Screws Brutality," and 4 warders beat up 1 prisoner. "We demand a full public inquiry." Some inmates, who had had enough and did not want to risk further punishment, handed themselves in. However, others said they would only surrender if the following terms were granted: the Deputy Regional Director of Prisons and Chairman of the Board of Visitors and his deputy would be present at the surrender. Irish prisoners would not be singled out for special treatment, they would all be treated the same as other prisoners. Prisoners wanted to be received by their own officers from Hull. Up to £4 million worth of damage is thought to have been caused. Image, HDM. All were agreed in a bid to end the riot, but it took until September 3 for all the inmates to surrender, with 235 transferred to other prisons across the country, leaving only 75 prisoners on site to be accommodated in the only habitable wing left. The riot was deemed the most costly and devastating until the Manchester Strangeways prison riot in 1990. Over 2/3 of the prison was destroyed, with an estimated repair cost of £3 million to £4 million. Image, HDM. The facility had to be closed for a year while repairs were carried out, and an inquiry found it to be the most serious incident involving loss of control since a similar incident at the Dartmoor prison mutiny in 1932. Charles Bronson holds art teacher hostage in Hull prison. Bronson has been behind bars for more than 4 decades. Image, Sunday Mirror. This man is no stranger to controversy, and during a stint inside HMP Hull, Charles Bronson held a Bridlington man hostage for almost 2 days. Phil Danielson was conducting a tutorial at the Heaton Road Jail in February 1999 when armed robber Bronson, who is now known as Charles Salvador, burst into the classroom, tied a skipping rope around Mr. Danielson's neck and tugged him about at knife point. A bare-chested Bronson, who had escaped from solitary confinement, led Mr. Danielson through the prison while holding a broken beer bottle to his chest and brandishing a spear. It is thought he targeted the Hull City Council worker because he criticized one of Bronson's drawings. Victim, Phil Danielson. During the siege, which lasted 44 hours, Bronson hit himself over the head with the bottle before tearing a washing machine from the wall after barricading himself and Mr. Danielson in a room. Mr. Danielson was eventually saved and Bronson was apprehended, and it proved to be a costly mistake as he was locked up for life. Ethel Major, an execution which sparked controversy in Hull Prison. Ethel Major was the last person to be executed at HMP Hull. It had been 32 years since an execution had taken place at Hull Prison. But that didn't stop Ethel Major from having the noose placed around her neck after she murdered her husband. Arthur Richardson was the first to walk to the gallows after killing his aunt in 1902, and Major was the last in 1934. Although the jury showed compassion and recommended mercy in spite of her heinous crimes, the judge passed the death sentence on Major. It caused an outcry in the city and even prompted Lord Mayor Alderman Stark to send a telegram to Buckingham Palace asking the King and Queen to stop the execution. She poisoned her husband with strychnine. However, his efforts were in vain, and she paid the ultimate price, despite the fact that she maintained her innocence until the very end. Major killed the husband she despised by poisoning him. Arthur was said to be an unpleasant man and a heavy drinker, a womanizer and a brute who assaulted his wife. Hull police boss posts angry tweet as 7 officers heard in one night. Gossip fueled stories about his womanizing spread, and Major was said to have discovered love letters from their next-door neighbor. He died after falling violently ill, with Major blaming it on corned beef he had been eating. A post-mortem examination carried out on Arthur revealed his body contained a more than lethal amount of strychnine, and Major sealed her fate by accidentally revealing the name of the poison to police. During an interview, she told Detective Inspector Young, "I didn't know my husband died of strychnine poisoning," but the police had never mentioned that fact, and when the missing key to a box in which a bottle of the poison was kept by her father turned up in Major's handbag, the proof was sufficient enough for her to face a charge of murder. 2016 lockdown in Hull Prison. After a new influx of prisoners arrived at Hull Prison following rioting at Birmingham in December 2016, it was always going to create a hostile environment capable of blowing up at any minute. And that is exactly what happened as inmates went on the rampage, attacked staff and set fire to CCTV cameras after the transfer. Watch. Riot squads arrive at Birmingham. The prison was placed on lockdown and said to be on the brink of a riot, with staff warning it was like a powder keg waiting to go off. Thankfully, the 15 or so prisoners causing carnage were eventually brought under control, and the prison managed to avert what could have potentially been an unwanted repeat of the events of 1976. Charles Bronson's rumble in HMP Full Sutton after Hull City defeat. Charles is so notorious he appears twice on this list. Image, SWNS.com. That man again, and this time Hull City were apparently to blame for his bizarre antics, which led to him having even more time added to his painfully long sentence. The notorious inmate reportedly coated himself in Lurpak butter and attacked a dozen officers at the Pocklington prison after the Tigers lost 3-2 to Arsenal in the 2014 FA Cup final. It was thought Bronson had a rumble with officers at HMP Full Sutton because he's a fan of the Gunners' arch-rivals, Tottenham Hotspur. Watch the shocking moment. Burly inmate armed with weapons and chili powder takes on prison officers. In a letter written to his friend Kate Cray, who is the ex-wife of gangster Ronnie, he wrote, "Not good news. I've had another rumble, this time with a dozen riot mob on the yard. Obviously I had my reasons and I'd sooner swallow teeth than my pride. Sadly I came off worst, got smashed up ribs. Life goes on, Kate. You won't hear me moan." It was initially reported Bronson lashed out because Arsenal had beaten Hull City in the FA Cup final. However, a couple of months after the incident, a spokesman for the Charlie Bronson Appeal Fund attempted to put the record straight by revealing why Bronson in fact decided to lash out. A spokesman said, "Charlie doesn't care much at all for football. He happened to mention in a personal letter that he'd just watched Hull lose. Man threatens to slaughter Hull people in terrifying letter." Charlie was involved in an altercation because the prison, again, illegally withheld his mail. He did not go berserk, and despite sensationalist reporting, he does not go mad for no reason. He reacts to ill treatment, of which he has suffered decades now. He is 14 years over his tariff. There are far more dangerous people walking the streets. Feces flung at prison officers in Humber during 7-hour standoff. Humber, it may be a Category C prison near Brow and therefore home to some of the country's less dangerous inmates, but that did not stop controversy from sparking in Humber in 2014. Rioting inmates decided to attack prison officers and pelt them with excrement during a standoff which lasted 7 hours. A prison source told Hull Live at the time, 2 of the wings were involved and it started when it came to lock-up time at about 6:30 p.m. The 7 criminals who have been in court in Hull this week, 30 prisoners just refused to go into the cells and decided to take the wings under their control. A few staff members were assaulted, including a female. It took staff until 3 a.m. to bring it all under control. This is down to staffing shortages in the service at the moment. There was not enough staff to deal with it. That is how it ends up, with staff getting hurt. Watch. Things you are allowed to take to prison. The Ministry of Justice said order was in fact restored at 1 a.m., not 3 a.m., but Peter McPartland, national chairman of the Prisoners Association, described the incident as very serious. He called for the troublemakers to be brought before the courts and punished for their involvement in the riots. He said, "From what I can gather about what incident, officers had excrement put over them. It's absolutely disgusting and it shows the type of thing that our members have to put up with, and all for a starting salary of £18,000. I expect those involved to be referred to the police and for action to be taken against them." Follow Hull Live, our daily newsletter, to get the latest headlines direct to your email inbox every day. Click here. Follow Hull Live on Facebook, like our Facebook page to get the latest news in your feed and join in the lively discussions in the comments. Click here to give it a like. Follow us on Twitter for breaking news and the latest stories. Click here to follow Hull Live on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. On the Hull Live Instagram page we share gorgeous pictures of our stunning city, and if you tag us in your posts, we could repost your picture on our page. We also put the latest news in our Instagram stories. Click here to follow Hull Live on Instagram.